Thanks for coming on, Jake. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So Jake is a writer director from Canada. One thing we like to do before we start is just kind of, if you have a movie recommendation or something you've seen recently that you really liked.
So, actually, I just watched Disclaimer on Apple TV. It's a TV show, but it was so good. It was really, really great. It's like my favorite director, Alfonso Cuarón, who did Prisoner of Azkaban and Children of Men and Roma and like Gravity and some amazing movies. So it was a really great series that I really loved. And I recently, this is just the one that I recently saw. I saw Here with Tom Hanks, and it's directed by Robert Zemeckis, and it's like all from one angle. Have you heard about that, Braden? Like where it's like one angle of
No.
it's one angle of a living room, and it's like what has happened throughout all of history from that like little corner of the world. And everybody hated it, and it got terrible reviews. And I really loved it. Actually, I thought it was like cool and ambitious, and it's like melodramatic, but I really liked it.
So was it like one shot the whole time?
It's one shot, but there's like little transitions. It's not like a one take because it goes through centuries of time and different stories and all the different people that have lived in that house. But it's an unmoving camera angle. So you're sort of always in a wide shot the whole movie.
That's sick. That reminds me of, I think I told you about it, but that show called Monsters on Netflix.
Yeah. That episode specifically, you were saying like episode 4 or whatever, where it's one take.
Yeah, dude, it's one take that slowly pushes in the whole time.
Yeah.
It's like half an hour, and eventually you're just on the guy's face. I love when shows and movies do that kind of stuff.
That's an Alfonso Cuarón thing, like the first time that I ever watched Children of Men. Have you guys seen that movie?
No,
I haven't seen it myself.
Really? That's like one of my favorite movies of all time. But I watched it in theaters when I was like 10, and I didn't necessarily know why or what was happening, but I was like, this changed my perception of filmmaking. This makes me want to be a filmmaker. I didn't know why. And then I later like looked at it and rewatched it a million times, but it's like it is sort of the innovator of like these one takes and these really cool, ambitious oneers. And then obviously he does a lot in Gravity, and it does a lot of that show Disclaimer. So I love like a one take. I try to do it all the time, but it is one of those things, as you guys know, that just takes time and budget and practice and rehearsals, and it's so hard to do under like in an indie movie, especially.
I don't think we've even attempted that, have we? Yet?
No, I don't think so. It seems like incredibly difficult, and it is weird to get used to them too. I remember seeing it was like, was it 1917?
Yeah.
Is that right? Yeah. And
Yeah.
I remember trying to get used to it. I was like, oh, this is weird. Like I'm so used to cuts, it's like your brain just kind of that's what you think of a movie as. And it's like you have to adapt to the new reality of like, okay, we're just following the whole time. But once you sink into it, it's amazing. But yeah, I think I'm sure that's why it's always like mixed reviews, because some people are like, oh, I can't do this. It's like not right. But I think it's cool to push the boundaries like that. I mean,
yeah, I know, Braden, you're always paying attention to it. Like you always will recommend something and you'll be like, oh, there was a really sick oneer in that thing. And sometimes I don't notice it because if it's done well, it is just like life. Like that is your perspective of life. There are no cuts. So you shouldn't notice it a lot of the time.
Right, yeah.
Really showy. I know in Hill House they did that a lot, where like they'll have these really cool one shots that you tend to notice them a lot. Braden, like you know that you're paying attention so much in a film to like every technical element, right?
Yeah, and that's kind of sometimes is a bit of a curse now. Like when you watch movies, I'm sure you're the same, where you're just picking it apart, yeah. It's like once you know how something works, you can't really see it the same.
I felt that with 1917. It's like it's so cool, but I am distracted by how did they do that? How are they doing that? Where is the cut? And I sort of didn't pay attention to the movie as much because I was paying attention to the technical elements.
Yeah, I agree. But sometimes it's kind of cool. Like I watched Terrifier 3 recently. I don't know if you've seen that. But
I haven't seen the third one yet.
Yeah, like just knowing how like it was kind of it was still a small production, like a small crew and stuff, and seeing how they shot the second one like at this big farm property and like built everything themselves. Like going into the third one, it was kind of cool because it was like what went into it. But that was my
Yeah.
recommendation. I mean, I wouldn't recommend it to most people, but if you like horror, that was like probably the most brutal slasher I've ever seen. It was crazy.
Dustin, what have you seen?
So I watched for the first time The Invention of Lying.
Oh,
You've seen that one?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was basically, I mean, just like the basic plot without giving it away is just like no one can tell a lie in this world. So it's like a fantasy world essentially, but everything else is completely normal. So it's like a very weird movie when you don't know the plot, like going into it, you're like, wait, what's going on? And then you're like, oh, like you think of the title, but it's so interesting because it was one of those movies where it's like just the script, you know, as someone myself who's always technically analyzing like, oh, how'd they do this shot or whatever. It was just one of those movies where just the script and like the basic premise just kept me so hooked for like the first 30 minutes because I've never seen anything like it where, oh, everyone's telling the truth, but it's like they're saying like abrasive truths that you wouldn't like want to say to someone's face, but you're thinking it. And I don't know, it was a very interesting movie. I definitely recommend it.
Also, just like a great cast. Every role is like somebody who's so funny and famous and great.
What was it for you that like really you're like, okay, I'm gonna go all in on making movies? Because you do, like you have gone all in, like you've done a lot, like more than most people ever dream of doing. You know, you've done multiple features and TV shows, and you know what was it for you? Like when did that kind of happen where you're like, I'm doing this, and what aspect did you want to do the most, or yeah, just kind of go through that.
I see. I don't think I've ever been asked that question of like, what is that moment or how do you pinpoint that? I don't know. Like I know you know this, but like I was someone who used to like make movies when I was a kid. I got a camera when I was like 7 or whatever, and I never stopped making movies with friends and just fucking around and editing and sort of teaching myself all of those things that were really fun to do. Like I loved just filming random stuff and then editing it into something wacky and whatever crazy stuff came out of that, and then sort of slowly teaching myself the process, like there should be a script and then you should do this and then you should do this. I didn't go to film school. Like I thought that might ruin it for me, so I kept, while I was studying other things in university, I kept working on films and like trying to teach myself everything about every element that I liked. And I always started out as a writer, although I kind of hate writing. And I love directing, and I love editing, and producing even sometimes is fun. And like the challenge of how do you solve this puzzle to make this movie. Writing, I think, is like never fun, honestly. Maybe when it's done, it's like satisfying, but it's not ever enjoyable for me, I don't think. But I guess, so I made I made some shorts, I made some TV shows, I did a bunch of stuff in the industry. And I sort of started out wanting to get into TV, but it's so hard. There are so many different barriers to it. You have to get in a writer's room, and then you have to do this, and like, because TV is such a massive thing. Whereas what I liked about movies was that even you can do an indie movie, you can make a movie for no money, you can make a movie with your friends. Like it doesn't have to be great, but you can make it, you can show it to people. So I guess I went all in on, it was like my first movie. It was like, I guess, right around when I graduated university. And I was like, I don't want to wait around to get a job. I know that I want to work in the film industry. So I'm going to write a movie that I can shoot. Even if I don't raise any money, I'm going to write a movie that I can shoot for no money. And then I did it, and then I made it, and um, still never thought like this is it, like I'm all in. I always still thought like I need a backup plan, I better do this, I need a job doing that. But then, that opportunity of making that movie, it came out and a lot of people liked it, and that led to another opportunity, which led to another opportunity. So I wouldn't say ever as a filmmaker you're like, oh, I did it, like I'm all in now, because still always, especially in Canada, where it's so hard to make a living, very few people do it working in film. you're always thinking like, well, fuck, I gotta become an English teacher or something because like I cannot pay my bills. So you're never, even after making 3 movies and 3 TV series and all of the stuff that I've done now, like I'm like, I don't know what's gonna fucking happen next month. I know I'm working on stuff. I know I'm making movies. I know that is my job and my career, and that is how people view me. But in the back of my head, I sometimes am like, I don't know. I gotta become a dog walker or whatever.
Yeah, dude, it seems like I mean, we've talked about this on a few episodes. Like, there is a big misconception about it, you know? Like,
Yeah.
you've made it once you do these things, but it's always, it is like you don't know what's next. But I think the one thing that people have a hard time doing is like not giving up when shit gets
Mhm.
hard, and like you have to just keep showing up. But yeah, man, it's so what kind of keeps you going? Because for me, with anything, it's just you don't know what tomorrow's going to bring. You could get
Mhm.
that email, it could take 10 years, but what do you think
Yeah.
it is? Or is it just because you just love it so
Well,
much?
I think you're right that so many people, especially, me and you, and we've been doing this for a while now, where like I find it interesting. Even like, I was like 21, like winning some like contests and stuff and getting some like recognition as a writer, and the people like those traditional gatekeepers, agents or production companies or whoever who are like, you're not good enough yet, or you're too young, or you need to do all this, whatever. I found it interesting as I've kept going up in the industry and getting more recognition. They quit. They work on a farm. Those people that told me no, they didn't even fucking make it. So nobody knows anything, and don't listen to anybody who tells you no, because like that guy is literally working on an alpaca farm. Sorry to that guy who didn't want to be my agent, but he's raising alpacas, and I have made 3 movies. So those people quit, and sure, and a lot of people quit, and that is fine. If you find out it's not for you, or you find out you can't do it, and there's something else that you can do, you should do it, because the film industry has too many people that are trying to get in, that if you don't love it and you don't have something new to offer, then that's fine. You should quit. But if like us, like we've never quit, like never did I actually think about quitting. Of course, every day I think about quitting, but never in any real way. Um, so I forget your question, but let's talk about that guy's alpaca farm.
Yeah. That's great, man. Yeah.
Well, that we were just saying like what kind of keeps you going, even through all the adversity. And it's yeah, you're totally right. Where me and Braden, we've both been doing music for so long, but you still, it doesn't matter. It's like every day you're like, I should maybe think about handing in that application. It'd be kind of nice. Well, things would get a little bit easier. It might like because there's so much. I don't know. It's just a lot of uncertainty, and I guess you see people with the certainty, and you're like, man, that's kind of nice. But then at the same time, a lot of times they're looking at you like, wow, like you're being able to express yourself and like create these amazing things. But yeah, I guess like so personally, I last night I watched your first movie and Cup of Cheer, but we'll get to that afterwards. It's all about who you know. So I'm kind of curious because I felt like when I was watching, I was like, wow, this is pretty impressive for like a first, feature film,
Thank you.
cinematography and stuff. What's what's the story behind that? And like, cause basically what's just like the lead up to that?
Yeah, so that was always, and with a lot of ideas, it's like that idea will kick around in your head for a couple years until, and it will stick with you, and as long as it sticks with you, you'll keep thinking about it, and you're like sort of writing it in your head throughout many years, even if you don't know you are. So that was one of those ideas that I like had since high school, and it just always stuck around until I was like, okay, I'm going to make it. Like I've tried. I had worked on a big TV show at that time, and I had done a bunch of other things, but I was tired of like hearing like, no, you're too young and wait until this. And especially in Canada, nobody wants you to be young. Like until you're like 45, nobody takes you seriously, which is crazy. It's the total opposite in the US. Like
Mhm.
the younger you are, the better you are. So I just kept being told like, no, 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 like come back in 10 or 15 years. And I was like, fuck that. I'm gonna make my own movie. And I have the ability to do that. And even if I have to shoot it on a DSLR with like 5 people, I'm going to do it. So I wrote a movie that was producible. That was sort of how that started before even knowing really what producing meant, but just like, I know I have access to these locations. I know I could do this. I know whatever. So that was that. That was how it started out. I just wrote it knowing one way or another I will make it. And then it sat in a drawer, half finished for a long time until enough had happened where I was like, okay, I'm making it this summer no matter what. And I think when that clicked, it was like, and maybe you guys have had that experience, but like once you say that, you're so determined to do it that nothing
Mhm.
can stop you and you sort of have a date in mind. So I approached some people and I found a producer who was willing to help me produce it and sort of taught me a lot of what I know about producing now. And yeah, we made it and it was very challenging. It was very hard. And I was like 23 and nobody wanted to listen to me and nobody and everybody crew and everybody was older than me and they're like, who the fuck is this kid like telling me what to do? And a lot of the time I was like, I don't know. Who the fuck is this kid telling you what to do? Like, you're a grip who's been doing this for like 5 or 10 years. You must know better. And then what I learned is like, no, I have to be the one to know better. I have to be the one who's confident in what I am doing and saying. And it maybe took like sometime around, the third week of that movie where I'm like, okay, I can do this. Like, I'm gonna tell them what I want. I am going to be the director. Um, and then once that came out and people liked it, um, I felt like it was easier to like know what I wanted and to know how to like trust myself with these things.
Yeah, Braden, you were talking a little bit about that too. It's just like you get on a set for the first time, Farlight's our first thing. And we're like, oh, like there's a bunch of people and you have to kind of I guess Braden, you can kind of talk about that process, like doing your
Yeah,
first
we were talking about that
directing thing.
yesterday,
Yeah.
right? Like you're
Yeah.
Yeah, dude. Yeah, it's hard. Like I'm not used to doing that kind of stuff, and it's in a way like maybe similar to producing music with other people. Like a big part of why I started doing it myself is because I could never express what I really wanted without like feeling weird about it. Or I'm sure that was hard on your first film with people yeah. Because I mean, with our crew, it's like it's only three of us, and I know both of them really well, so it's more comfortable. But to find that confidence to be like, no, this is what we're doing. That's probably like hard. Um, yeah, it's a lot of trust in other people too.
and that's great when you can trust somebody.
Yeah.
But like these people had come to me like randomly through randomly being hired. And it's like, I remember like thinking something like a production designer did was like, that doesn't look right. But I remember being like, what do I know? They're the production designer. It must look right to them and I won't question them. And then when I saw it after like months later, I'm like, no, that didn't look right. Like I should have said something because
Mm.
nobody is going to say anything if not me.
100%, man. It's all so subjective too. I feel like with any
Yeah.
creative stuff, it's like it could go a million ways, but yeah, I think you always know best like what your vision is. So, but I thought it was a great movie too. I watched it a couple years ago and really enjoyed it. So,
Thanks. I mean, I can't, it's hard to watch anything like you do. We just did a screening for Cup of Cheer, and I had told there was like a big film critic who was running the Q&A, and I was like, yeah, I would do it all differently. And he was really surprised. But I think as filmmakers, we know like no matter what, even if you just finished a movie yesterday, which will be your best movie, you're still gonna want to do it again and have a million ways that you think you can make it better. But some people don't have that. And I think some people are like, that's great. I did a great job. And we watch it and we're like, what the fuck?
dude, 100%, man. Yeah, I think being your own worst critic in a way is a huge like asset, because
Yeah.
you always want to outdo yourself.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, let's talk about Cup of Cheer then. It's almost Christmas. How did the screening go?
It was great. It was great. Too bad you weren't there, but it was really busy. Almost everybody there had never seen it before, which was a really cool way to see it. And I sort of got up and I'm like, you don't know what you're in for. But no, like I assumed because sometimes in the big screening, people come to that movie thinking it is just like a general family Christmas movie, and then they leave because it's very quickly not that. So I had assumed some people will walk out, which is like fine, and I'm used to that now. Like I'm used to like there being like a 70-year-old couple who's like, let's go have a nice night watching a Christmas movie, and then they leave after 5 minutes. And that's cool and that's fun. And that is part of the charm of that movie. Like I like that people are going to hate that movie. But everybody loved it. And like there was huge laughs at, especially things that I never heard got laughs. Like it's such a dense movie that each time you watch it is a different experience. So I mean, Braden, you like when we first saw it, remember we were in drive-ins, like sitting in a car, and there was times where I would like mute the radio and roll down the windows to like hear if we could hear any like muffled laughter from a car next to us because we didn't know what would get laughs.
Yeah, I remember that too, and that was something I wanted to touch on. Is that you did that run of drive-ins, which to me was cool. I feel like that's not something that a lot of people did. But that was awesome, man. It was like pretty packed every time. And yeah, it was cool to kind of like a couple times like sitting outside, just listening to the laughter. And it was interesting to hear parts like, oh, I didn't expect it there, or I did expect it there. Like, yeah, it was pretty cool. So
yeah. So it's always different. And just because of when we launched that movie, knowing it was such a wacky comedy, but never getting to see it at the first few years in theaters because of COVID was like such a weird experience. And now it's sort of taken on a life of its own, which is cool.
Yeah, I feel like it ages well. And I kind of felt like that would happen. Even my dad, I was talking to him the other day. He's like, yeah, I found the DVD when I was cleaning out the basement. I think I'm gonna throw it on, holiday classic. But yeah, I kind of just want to talk about like how I met you a little bit, if you don't mind going into that. Like, so you shot in this town called Aurelia. Is it okay to say?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So you shot in this town called Aurelia, which is where I lived at the time. And my mom said, she's like, hey, I found this posting on Facebook. They're shooting a movie here. I was like, oh, cool. So checked it out. I think I don't know, sent in a whatever application. I don't know what it was. Can't remember how you guys had it.
You sent in like some of your Dake and Tight stuff and like a reel of some of your funny things. I remember.
Okay. Yeah. So then I showed up to the audition and I didn't have a script, I don't think. And there was all these other people that had scripts.
It was an open audition in like a community center.
It was, yeah. And there was all these people there that looked way more like a Christmas movie than me. And I was like, oh, there's no way. Like I had prepared a monologue or something because I didn't know what I would have to do. I was so nervous, dude. I remember this kid was in front of me and he went in and he was like doing magic tricks or something. And I was like, oh, they got like, I'm out of here. But yeah, man. So I went in and you had me read some part. I think it was like a scene from a coffee shop. And I was like, oh, that was garbage. Like, I was like, I did such a bad job. And then I left. And then the DP, Daniel, came out and he called me back. And then he had me read for like a drunk Santa thing. And I was like, oh, that was also garbage. I'm never going to hear from them again. But I was just really surprised when you guys reached out. So it was pretty cool.
Yeah, so I remember like it's interesting from the other perspective of like behind the scenes what you don't know as an actress. So I remember getting your tape as we were getting hundreds of other tapes. And like yours, there was something that was so original about like your voice, your sense of humor that I knew was similar to mine and that would work well. And it was so distinct because every other tape you get is so generic and bad and like whatever we sort of know what we want when we're looking at things. And even if it doesn't quite fit, it's like, oh, but I can see where that might be useful. So then you came in and I remembered you from having already seen your funny stuff. And you're right, like that, if you're making like a Hallmark Christmas movie, like your look doesn't necessarily fit in with that sort of stereotypical thing. But that was what was interesting about you, like from a first glance, even not knowing you were funny and smart and talented and all that stuff, is just like we're not making a typical movie. So like we could do something cool here with somebody that you would never usually see in these movies, but also he could act and he was funny and he was a cool like guy. I think when did we really first hang out? I guess it would have been on set, right? Because we kind of found you like Yeah, because like a lot of the roles were already cast by the time we did that Aurelia audition, and we were looking for like background actors. But then we found you, who was like the best actor of the bunch, and I was like, okay, I have to write a role for him just to have him in there in some way. And then obviously we hung out on set a lot and realized how much we got along and how much we had a similar sensibility. Um, so yeah, so that was really cool. You just never know what somebody is looking for.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, the wonky henchman. I had a great time doing that, man.
I want a cherry bran muffin.
I only have cinnamon ginger flax fart.
Were you trying to kill me? You ain't nothing but a budget, Mrs. Claus!
I should go over there and give that guy a piece of my ass.
It was great, dude. I remember when I read the script, I was just like, hell, like, fuck yeah, man. Like, I loved that comedy. And I was like, because I'm a pretty, like, I don't know, I'm not a very outgoing person, but with comedy, I love just being able to let loose and do like whatever the hell. And I don't feel weird about it or bad about it. It's just like, yep.
That's interesting. Is that like an outlet for you? Like that is when you get to be your fucking wonkiest, is like when you're a character.
Yeah, dude. I have an easier time playing a character than I do just being myself, honestly. So yeah, man, it was a great experience. And then doing the score, that was fun. That was really cool.
That's awesome. Yeah, I just watched it fully through last night. And
did Braden warn you, or you saw it when it came out?
So yeah, when it first came out, I think I watched it a little bit, and because Braden was in it, and I was like listening to some of the music, and then I don't think I like fully grasped what it was, right? Like you were saying, if you don't know what you're to expect, and then when I watched it fully last night, knowing what it takes to make a film, like having the context, like you know, it's the Hallmark Christmas film parody type thing, and having seen enough Hallmark Christmas movies myself. I mean, I just thought it was so absolutely hilarious and just so well executed, because those stereotypes are perfectly fleshed out. And yeah, like what made you sort of want to do that, I guess, make a Christmas parody type thing?
I think like cynically, well, no, I had always wanted to do like what Braden says, like a wacky, fucked up comedy. Like that is like, you know, the goal is just like stuff as many jokes in as you could. From the very beginning, my like rule was like 6 jokes a minute, so a joke every 10 seconds. And I think
it was dense. Yeah, I noticed that.
Yeah, like because everything, and even if you don't, like, there's 10 jokes going on in the background, dependent on whatever the people are saying in the foreground. But so I always wanted to make like a really wacky movie like that. But then part of it actually came from like just the logistics of producing, like, as you guys know, being like, what can I make? What can I get made? And so the lesson after my first film was 2 things. One was that I had a bunch of meetings after that with like a bunch of the people that when I was younger were like, okay, wait, come back to me in 10 years, like do something, do whatever first. So then, you know, the movie did pretty well and ended up on Crave, which is in Canada like our biggest streaming platform. And a lot of people saw it, and it got some critical acclaim. And then I went and had all those meetings with those people again. And they were like, yeah, well, good job. Like, you made a really great movie. Now you should try making a Hallmark Christmas movie, because you're never gonna make money like doing this stuff. Like, you just gotta get a paycheck, like go make a Hallmark Christmas movie. And I thought I would rather fucking kill myself. Actually, now though, if Hallmark wants to hire me, I'll take the money, you know. But no, I didn't want to do that at all. And I have a tendency to do the opposite of what people say. And then the other part of it was just like knowing what worked and what didn't work from that first movie. So one thing was like, people were like, that movie was so great, but because there's no celebrities in it, because there's no stars in it, no one's ever going to find it. And because it's like a indie coming of age rom-com, like that's not a genre that people are looking for unless you have a famous person in it. So I sort of took all of those lessons and I was like, what can I do with all of this information? And one thing was like, well, Hallmark Christmas movies are so popular and they don't need celebrities. So it sort of started out being like that. Like, I can make a Christmas movie that doesn't need stars. It's sort of the one genre that doesn't. I know how to do that. I know what Christmas movies look like and sound like. And then the other part of it was like, I also know that every year from like a producing standpoint, I can do more screenings. I can get more press on it. Like it will come back every year to be a cult hit. And then since I knew I didn't want to make a legitimate Hallmark Christmas movie, I just sort of mashed up all of what I wanted to do in a movie, which was this wacky, crazy thing. And it all happened very quickly from there. Like from deciding to do it until we were filming it was like literally 3 months, which is unheard of.
That's insane.
But it just sort of all felt right and came together at the right time. And again, was a matter of me being like, okay, I am going to do this and making that decision and then figuring it out from there.
Yeah, like when you set the date, that's kind of.
Yeah. Is that sort of what happened with you, Farlight? Because obviously you were talking about it. And then it's like once that clicks in your head, you're like, I'm doing it no matter what.
Yeah, dude. Yeah, it's hard because it's so easy to sit on something for forever.
And it's like a snowball. It's like once you start it, it will keep going.
And you just figure shit out as you go, too.
And the momentum makes you keep going.
Exactly, yeah. Yeah, man. You guys shot that in what, like 18 days or something, right?
Yeah, I think 16 days.
16 days, yeah.
Wild.
Yeah, I'd say one of the most bold scenes is probably the bathroom scene.
I got some questions about that last at the screening, so I'm curious what you're gonna say.
No, it's funny because I was there when you guys shot that, and I was like tucked in the corner of the bathroom. It was just a great experience, man. But I just remember, was it Jess that was making all the props? And she was like, yeah, this is like honey and food coloring. And I was like, oh, it's actually like a delicious concoction. But yeah, I just thought it was hilarious. So
yeah, some people asked at the Q&A at the screen, they were like, would you do that scene again? Because the reaction in a theater is always like, oh my God. Like nobody, like it gets laughs out of like shock and it gets groans, but nobody, but it's like so horrible and disgusting in a way that is not typical. That it's like, would I do it again? I don't know. Like I did do it. So I got it out of my system. I wouldn't do it again. But if I was to redo it, would I do it again? I don't know. Like, I think it is such a unique experience just to be in a theater with people that are seeing something so awful and off-putting that like they've never experienced that before. Like that reaction every time we see that in a theater is something you never see in any other theater. So from that perspective, it's a cool experience, even though it is arguably awful.
First time I saw it, I was just like, wow, like I was like, I've never seen this before. But I guess what you're kind of saying is it's like you can do that like as an indie filmmaker. Like there's not going to be a million people trying to stop you necessarily. And I feel like that is kind of what's cool about it is just like you can just kind of do the craziest shit you could possibly imagine. And like it's out there, you know, I don't know. That's interesting.
And I think sometimes that's scary too, is like there's nobody to tell you no. So how do you know like what's too far or what you shouldn't do? But that's just experimenting and trying it. And hopefully like you have people you trust. Like I would always show stuff to Braden as I was working on it as like a test of like, is this funny? Is this crazy?
Yeah. And I think one thing I really liked about it when I was doing the score, and I think like when comedy, like when you play it straight, kind of like I like that a lot, especially with the score. You're like, yeah, we want this, you know, really emotional, beautiful Christmas score underneath all this stuff. And it was just a cool contrast, you know? So it was just funny, like having those scenes and like, it's just all this wacky stuff going on. I'm just composing like this emotional music, you know?
Like you're sort of ignoring all the other shit and you're focusing on what is real to these characters. And that's what the actors, I think, did too. Like, there's so much crazy shit, but the actors did such a good job because they are still focusing on like what is real, even though it is all so heightened and ridiculous.
Yeah, for sure. What's your perspective? Like, how many years has it been? Like 4 years or?
It's coming up in February. Will be 5 years since we shot it.
What's your perspective on it now versus then? Like, did it kind of do what you wanted? Because I just remember thinking like, yeah, this will be something that kind of keeps having life every year and just kind of a fond movie.
I never thought that. I never sort of had any delusions of what it could be. I just thought like it's a quick little movie that I want to make because I think it's funny and I think these people are funny. I thought it was weird and like maybe would help my like comedy writing career or something. But I never had any like thoughts about it becoming a classic or a hit or something that people liked. I knew that half the people that saw it would love it and half the people would hate it, which has been true. Um, but just seeing how many people, I think the odd thing is just seeing how many people truly love it in a way that is like more than most movies. Like first for what it is, for such a tiny for what is arguably the smallest budget movie that many people will ever see in their lives. Like they don't know just how small that budget is. But for people to go into that theater like last week when we had our screening, there was somebody who was like, I wandered in last year not knowing what this was. Like I saw a Christmas movie was playing and I came in and I have seen it 8 times since then. And this year I came back and brought all my friends. Like there is something about it because it is so different that people latch onto it. Somebody else, had told me that they were like severely depressed. They were thinking about like killing themselves, and somebody recommended they watch this funny movie, and they literally credit it to saving their life. And you think like it's such a dumb, stupid movie, but I've heard those stories again and again. Like there is for some reason something about it. And I think that's a testament to just like being fucking weird with shit and not worrying. Like, do you guys have that too? Like, whenever you feel like this is too weird, how do you deal with that?
Yeah, I'm very much like, if this is what I want to do, this is what I'm going to do type of thing. Like I just think like
you are the audience, and if you like it, somebody's going to like it.
Exactly. And I think it depends why you make it. Because for me at this point, I just like to make stuff for myself, basically. Like even Farlight, I'm just doing that to satisfy like myself. Obviously, I love all of it and like working with the guys and everything. But I feel like it's when you start being like, oh, what would people want to see? And there's a place for that, I'm sure, but it's just not for me. So I feel like you just always got to use your gut and what you want as kind of a gauge. And a lot of times it's like the things that people think like, oh, this is too much or you should cut it out. It's like, that can become the part that people love. Like that's happened so many times,
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I'm very much the same with that.
Yeah. I mean, we both kind of were talking about stuff. I mean, cause I came onto this and this is Braden's project, Farlight. And it's like, there's already those moments where I'm like, oh man, really? You want to do that? Or you want to do this? But it's like, just always having an anchor of like, what's the purpose of the movie? Why are you doing it? Like, I think in like trying to convey that to other people too is good. Cause I know we have that thing. We just have this thing where when we're on set, it's kind of like everyone's like because we're so new too, is a lot of with like the DP stuff. We all kind of have like a sense of lighting and like cinematography knowledge. So we're all kind of collaborating on each shot, but sometimes it's like, this last project, we were kind of like clashing where we're like almost too collaborative. We're like, oh, actually someone just needs to be like, this is the shot. And, yeah, I guess for you, Jake, so you've directed, you've 3 films total, like feature films, right?
Yes. Yeah, my third just came out, a couple months ago.
So what was the crew difference? Cause me and Braden just operating on a total skeleton crew. You had your first movie, It's All About Who You Know, to Cup of Cheer. Was there like a big difference in how many people were involved, or how did that kind of evolve?
Those were very similar. I mean, they were very different in terms of budget, but by the time I did Cup of Cheer, I knew how to stretch budgets and how to save money and what I could do on my own. So I would say the crew size was similar, although the budget was like 5 times smaller.
Really? Wow.
But the difference in every project that I've done is just, as you guys would know, like sort of finding your people, finding who you trust, and finding who shares your sensibilities, because it is so hard, especially in Canada, where like there is an idea of like, what is a Canadian film? Like, what does that look like, and what does that feel like? And that is something that Braden and I don't subscribe to and like actively push against. So sometimes if you have crew that's worked on like 40 Canadian films that year and you're telling them to do something different, they'll be like, no, that's not how it's done. Like, you can't do that.
Mm-hmm.
And then you'll have to push back. So with every movie, I've sort of found more of like my people, the people that I that know either to trust me or know what I want, because it is such a specific voice. And like I remember
Mhm.
with Cup of Cheer, I remember hearing, or I've heard since, that a lot of the crew was like, this guy doesn't know what the fuck he's doing. Like, what kind of insane bullshit is this? Like, this is not funny. This is not good. This is dumb. And then, like, obviously I knew what I was doing, and
Mhm.
it came out being the way I wanted. But when people aren't on that same page with you, they can think they can think that they know so much more than you, and that sort of makes it harder to get what you want. You're like, I want this here because I know what it looks like in my head. And part of that is just conveying it better as a director and knowing to trust yourself.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But it's interesting. So with each time I've like sort of found more of my people and more of the people that just know like Jake's gonna do his thing. Like that is his tone, that is his specific thing. And like let's just trust him. So that's been nice. That's been really nice.
Yeah, one quick technical question, because I love nerding out about the technical stuff. But I guess as far as like camera and lens choice for Cup of Cheer, I noticed, or Braden was telling me you guys went with the Orion anamorphic. Was there a specific reason that was chosen for the film? I think it is such a like a unique look, especially with a comedy. What was, yeah, I guess what were some of the choices technically
Yeah.
that you
I
made?
think there's something like about it doesn't necessarily work from a parody perspective in like terms of Hallmark, because no Hallmark movie is shot anamorphic. A Hallmark movie should be overlit and oversaturated and very spherical and clinical. But then there's something about like giving it that warm Christmas feel, like a classic Christmas movie, which might be more a little more anamorphic, like maybe more Home Alone-y. So we mashed a bunch of those things together, and knew when we were like seeing dailies and stuff that the movie looked better than a lot of Hallmark movies. There's some really nice shots, there's some really nice lighting, and I wasn't afraid to do that, because even though I'm parodying something, I still want this to look as best as it can. So part of the technical elements sometimes for me as a director are just like, how can I make this look as cool as possible? Because I want sort of everything to shine, whether that is the score or your sound design or acting or whatever. Like I always, if one part is falling down a little bit in a scene, I want there to always be something else that is elevating it.
Right. Yeah, you definitely could take great advantage of all the bokeh with Christmas lights. It's like,
That
yeah,
was
you could
another
really
thing,
see the
knowing,
anamorphic shine.
yeah, just knowing there's going to be lights
Right.
everywhere.
Yep, 100%.
Kind of talking about your most recent movie, A Thousand Cuts. You guys shot on the Arri Alexa Mini, right?
Yeah, with now I'm blanking on the lens name. With
Was it the Master Primes?
Yeah.
Or yeah.
No. Yes, sorry.
Yeah.
It was.
So what was that transition like? Because I know I'm guessing it was kind of a step up, you know, from your second movie and just budget
It
crew.
was very different in that that is a very dark movie, and tonally it's very different. And there was a lot of like touchstones of like, how do we make this look like, because it's a murder mystery, so we wanted it to feel like a dark, spooky murder mystery. And I was tired of, because I had just done this anamorphic movie, I didn't want to go anamorphic again. I wanted everything to be very sharp and like Finchery and digital.
Mhm.
And I just think, yeah, certain movies deserve certain looks, and I am someone who always wants to experiment with different genres and different feels. Like, obviously, I've made 3 movies now that are all very different from each other, and I would love to keep doing that. So I just like playing around with different stuff, because I also like the technical stuff. Like when I was a kid, I was a guy behind the camera. I was guy editing. Like I loved telling a story visually, because I didn't know how to do it any other way. And just sort of growing up on film being like, this is how this should feel. I think Braden, you and I
Mhm.
talk a lot about like that, like what does like a nostalgic movie for us look and feel like? And I think part of it is just like, that's how I remember that movie being like, and there's this intangible thing that I like try to capture.
100%. I feel like with our movie Farlight, it's like Tales from the Crypts, you know, scary
Yeah.
stories. Are You Afraid of the Dark? Like obviously it's different, but that's kind of what I grew up with and love. And there's an element of that, even though it doesn't necessarily fit maybe into like modern, horror and stuff, but I just love that. So yeah, I think that's a great point. It's just conveying a feeling sometimes, and how do you
Yeah.
get there?
And because so many, I think a boring movie, like again, when Braden and I talk a lot about like, what did you see and what did you like lately? And I think when we talk about like, what is a boring movie? It's just like, it didn't leave a mark. It didn't make me feel anyway. It was fine, but it wasn't bad enough to be interesting and it wasn't good enough to be good. So
Yeah.
like, I would rather make
Mm-hmm.
a terrible movie that tries to be interesting than a generic movie that is fine.
Yeah, for sure. What was the experience like on this one? Because I guess it was your first like thriller. Would you call it a thriller, or how would you kind of categorize
Yeah,
it?
dark comedy thriller kind of thing. It was good. Like I had sort of the biggest cast I've had. I had the biggest budget that I've ever had. I was the most confident that I've ever been. I had, everybody sort of trusted me at that point, and become I had become like the sort of the expert on set all of a sudden, which was a really interesting shift. Um, and I don't know how I feel about it yet. Like it's not come out yet. Some days I hate it and some days I love it. Um, Having just watched, so this was the first time I watched Cup of Cheer since now seeing a new movie that I made in theaters because we did some festivals and they were totally different experiences, but I liked Cup of Cheer so much more this year after having worked on this other movie for the last 2 years, just to like see it all, like, because I forgot about the challenges that I went through making it now. It's so far in the back of my memory that, like, to now just watch it, you could sort of be like, that's a funny movie. Like, I don't care that that wasn't in focus or that wasn't what I wanted it to be. Now I just know that it's funny.
Yeah, you're like unattached to it. You're not as close to it now. I could, because me and Braden experienced that with music too, where it's like you make a song, you hear it, you mix it forever. It's like editing, right? You're mixing it and it comes out. By the time the song's out, you're like, well, here it is. But then maybe a year later, you're like, you're not as close. Then you hear it and you're like, oh, actually, it's kind of a good song.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a really cool feeling when you feel like some past version of you knew what they were doing, even if you didn't feel like it.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of the same. Well, this is my first time like editing big like narrative stuff, and it's the same. It's like sometimes you're so lost in it, you're like, this all sucks, and then you don't touch it for a couple weeks or a month, and you're like, oh wait, this is actually dope.
Yeah.
So it's hard to find that balance of like, how do you do that after you shoot something? Do you like, I'm taking this amount of time away from it, or you just dive right in?
Yeah, like ideally, if you have time, whether writing a script or editing or shooting, like it's got to sit in a drawer for a month or so. And I have to like live my life and think about something else until I come back to it. But it's like there's no matter what, if you're in it, you're gonna be like so in it that you don't know anymore what is good and bad, and you just have to keep going, trusting that some part of the back of your brain does know. Like there have been so many times where I'm just like just going because it feels right, and I have to trust that it is.
Yeah, I feel like that's a hard thing when you're you almost, because you're so wrapped up in something. Because I know we experienced that with just everything we've been doing, where it's like recently, Braden, you just like took another stab at editing Hedge Mill too, because you're like, maybe if I wait, 4 or 5 months, I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's an interesting thing as a creative. It's like most other things, it's just like, you just work nonstop on it and eventually it's done and you're good. But with creativity, you almost have to like, there's like this dance, like it's I don't know, just this like weave that's like going back and forth. You have to put something aside, forget about it, and then try to make it novel to yourself again, which is like a weird thing. That's just an odd thing, but yeah.
And we've kind of had the luxury of like shooting over the course of like, it was like almost 2 years. So it's like, as we go, we get better and then we can go reshoot. And it's like, now I can re-edit because I've learned all this stuff. But I know we're both like, we just want to shoot a full movie in one go, because I'm sure it's like a lot easier 100%. And better.
Yeah, there's something about like doing it all, like, having a month or whatever and just knowing, but it's also scarier because it's like when that month is over, it's done and I'll never be able to go
Mhm.
back to it. Here, you get to sort of workshop at each time and know what you need to do differently. So I actually love like you. I think that's a luxury that you guys have currently that you won't have
Yeah.
in the future. To like enjoy it while you have it.
Definitely trying
That's
to.
true.
How much
Yeah.
how much pre-production you usually do? Like how much time do you spend on pre-production?
I think it totally depends on the movie. Like the first one was months and months to try to get it all right and make sure that it all fit together. Obviously, Cup of Cheer was like so much quicker because it was like, here's our window, we have actors, let's figure it out and shoot while there's still snow on the ground. My newest movie was a matter of like, here, I think there's some funding. I think this works in the calendar. Like, I actually got money to make it before I had even written the script. So it's always
Okay.
different. And now I'm sort of working on things where I don't know if I'll ever make it. I don't know if I'll ever have money to make it. So I'm just now focusing on the script. So each project is very different in terms of like pre-production. And I just always, like everybody, just always wishes there was more time.
So you storyboard out pretty much everything. I mean, we're still trying to figure out what's standard approach. I know everyone's a little bit different. Some people don't.
No, I've never actually storyboarded anything. There's always shot lists and there's always very specific plans of what the day looks like. But I've yet to make like an action film or something that requires more visual storyboarding. It's often a lot of people talking and just what's the
Mhm.
most interesting way to convey that.
Right,
Right.
yeah.
But it
Yeah,
would be
we
cool. It would be very cool to storyboard something.
we storyboarded the last thing we shot, but part of that was because like we have to do so many different things in the moment that just
Yeah.
haven't,
Mhm.
for us having a roadmap was a game changer. So I never really did that before.
Like I like the improvisation that comes from being on set or from being in the space and being like, oh no, this is a really cool way of framing it. Like so I don't want to be like pigeonholed into that's the storyboard, that's what we have to do. I'm curious actually your guys' thoughts because that's another thing about like being flexible and stuff we were talking about. Like on my first set, those crew, like for example, it had to be raining in a scene, very very quick scene, like characters just getting a little bit wet and running out of shot from the rain. And obviously it was a sunny day and it wasn't raining. And I was like, what can we do? And they're like, well, we can't do anything. Like, there's no rain tower. There's no rain person. There's no this. There's no this. This is how we were trained to make rain. And I was like, well, can we just like put a hose, like spray a hose in front of the camera at the actors? And they're like, that'll never work. That's so dumb. We're not going to do that. Like that. We can't do that. And I was like, okay, I'll do it. Like, I'll get the fucking hose and I'll do it. And it worked. Obviously, it worked. And it looked like there was rain and the actors got wet. And that is what is in the movie. And you would never know. But they were so against it because they were not told to do it. And that is one example among many where like being innovative or trying to be Indian, trying to do things in a different way is often with like film people looked down upon. But I found specifically first with working with Braden and then Paul, who's sort of become my DP over the years, and all these other people, they are musicians. They're musicians first and like rock stars who have like a let's fucking do it sort of attitude. And I have found weirdly that I like working with musicians turned filmmakers more than people that went to film school because they are so much more open to like rock and roll and just like let's fucking do what we can do. Do you guys have have you noticed that? Do you know what that might be?
Man, it's kind of a good, yeah, it's an interesting thing. I think it could be a lot of things, but I think with music, like if you're like, okay, I want to make a movie, you can't just do that by yourself in a day. But as like making an album or a song, it's like you have this blank slate and you get to do whatever the hell you want. And you realize you can do whatever you want. And there's always a way to get sounds. And like, I know me and Dustin both shoot music videos for nothing. And we've just learned how to do that. And you're like, oh, there's always a way to do it.
Yeah.
And we did the hose on Old Dog.
Yeah. Yep.
And we made August look like winter in our last one. You just figure it out. Like, why is there not a way? That's kind of my thing. It's like, why? Like, exhaust every possibility and then shut it down first,
Right.
For some reason, I heard this as well from a person I know who, he edits. He was editing for like National Geographic, BBC, And he said that a lot of editors he works with were musicians turned, film editors. And I wonder what it is interesting. But yeah, I feel like you're forced to learn so many skills as a independent musician. It's just kind of ridiculous how many things you have to learn to like get a song out and then make a music video, and you're trying to do it DIY. So I wonder if something.
I'm
with
also
just
kind of
absolutely making it happen.
I'm also kind of convinced that most musicians actually want to be making films, and music's just easier, So that's part of it.
But you're right. It might be because, like, as a musician, you do everything. As an indie filmmaker, you're used to doing everything. But when you work with like crew people who are crew people, it's like, I am a grip. That is my job. This is what I have been told to do. If we don't have a 9x4, whatever the hell, then I'm not doing it, because I'm not
right.
I don't get paid to think about that other shit. Like, this is my job.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, that's a wild thing, just we're talking to Baz last week, who worked on a really big TV series in Ireland called Kin, and just saying how. And I was saying, well, what did you learn from that compared to doing your own independent movie? And he's really just like, there's so many people on set, and they're absolutely locked in to what they're doing, and the advantage of that is just obviously that's all that person's focusing on, so they can just maximize the quality and effort and time put into that. But there is something to be said, especially when you're making an indie film, to have, more people on set who can see the full picture, who kind of have, they're a little bit of a jack of all trades and can improvise. And, when shit goes south, or like Baz mentioned, one of his films, someone didn't show up with the keys to the location. And he's like, oh my gosh, we have all the crew here, 100 crew or whatever it was. We got to go to a new location, improvise it, and just shoot the whole thing, because this is the only day we have. And it's like, it's a wild thing. But I don't know. That's just something to think about. But,
that's why like the first few days that I had Braden on set and I didn't know him, and he was just like an actor who wanted to like come hang out and watch how that movie was made. And I quickly learned like he was somebody like me, one of the only people on set that was like me, where like I would start to talk to him and rely on him. Like, what is the idea? What can we do here? How do we do this? And he was always just so down to like improvise and try shit and figure it out in a way that nobody else was.
Yeah. I'm just fascinated by like every element, Yeah. And some people only care about whatever they're doing. Did you have any of your movies, any like days or like major like screw ups, or like, oh, we have to figure this out? Like, how are we gonna, or has it been pretty smooth?
No, there's always something. And in 1,000 Cuts, there was a huge rain. Like, obviously the whole movie is set during a thunderstorm in this big spooky mansion at night. And so from the beginning, I had written a climactic scene where they run out into the rain and into the thunder. They get soaking wet. And I knew that was important, because as an indie movie, like, we can see lightning and thunder and rain throughout the windows, but until somebody goes out in the rain and gets wet, it's going to feel cheap. It's going to feel like it never really happened. So I knew that they had to do that. And it was written in and it was budgeted in that we were getting a rain machine and we were getting all these rain towers. And this was the day that it was scheduled for. Like, the whole day was to do that scene. And then I would say like 4 days before that or whatever, which was planned, we were shooting, we were on set, that was happening. 4 or so days before that, the AD came up to me and said, it's 100% chance of rain that day, and we need to save money elsewhere. So what if we cut the rain tower, allocated that money elsewhere, and just shot in the rain? And I said, I guarantee it is not going to rain, because 100% chance of rain does not exist. There's no 100% chance of anything. But sure. Okay, we want to save money. I'll be a team player. Let's do that. We'll figure out another solution. So comes that day, obviously it doesn't rain even in the slightest. And everybody's like, what are we going to do? And the aide, like, I'm like, can I have a second to think? And the AD's like, nope, we got to do it right now. And so they put a hose or whatever like above an awning, and the actors stood like under this awning while it like sort of shittily rained outside, and they didn't get wet at all. And we spent like 45 minutes on it. And I was so like, it's hard, sometimes when something doesn't work and you're directing, you're just like, can't even see a solution because you're so bummed about it and you're like so depressed, but you're just like on autopilot.
Mhm.
So I'm like sort of directing it, but I'm knowing that it's never going to make final cut. So after a bit of time, I was like, okay, let's just stop. Like, let's just not do this. Let's stop. Let's move on to something else. Like, we'll figure it out. And eventually we waited. I cut some scenes. I compromised in other ways. And like on the last day, we found a way to actually shoot it in the rain. And everybody who doubted me and said like that will never work, that is stupid, when they saw the movie, they finally again were like, I understand why you had to do that. You were right. And it's one of those things where like if you don't have the confidence as the director to do that,
Mhm.
and if everybody doubts you and says that should not happen, you have to know that it, like you have to know and believe how it can happen. So there's always things.
Yeah. Yeah, man. And there's some things you just know, like, you're going to do it no matter what. Like, even if you're bummed about it, it's like, we're going to find a way to do it. So I think that's cool. And I don't know, man. I just think this whole thing, it's, you know, because I know there's some people that listen to this that are interested in filmmaking or any creative stuff. And it's hard when you don't have anyone to tell you, like, you just got to do it, and you can. And I know it sounds cheesy, but you just have to like go out and do it and like figure it out. And I think a lot of times it seems like, oh, you're just going to wait until something happens to you. And maybe that does happen sometimes, but
Yeah.
I don't know, man. It's one reason I really kind of connected with you is because you got the same mindset, just like make shit happen and do it, you know?
Yeah. But there's also something about it, like you can't be afraid. Like there's something, I don't know that the word is selfish, but there is something almost delusional about it, and that you can't be afraid to be like, no, I'm doing this, and no, I'm ignoring your advice. And like you say I can't do it, but I'm going to do it. Because a lot of people's personalities like, well, they said I can't and they said I shouldn't, so I guess I shouldn't. But you have to sort of be your, well, you have to be your own biggest like champion, and you have to kind of say like, well, fuck you. Whoever said no, I'm doing it anyway.
So I guess we'll probably wrap it up here soon, but just one thing I want to touch on before. I know you said, you know, writing isn't the funnest thing, and I 100% agree. It's hard because you have an idea and then you actually got to like, you know, structure it out. But
I'm on this podcast right now because I don't want to be writing.
Yeah.
I should be writing.
Yeah.
Well, I guess like because maybe it's the same for you, but to me, it's like, it's just a means to an end. It's just a means to do the, you know, whatever you got to do. Do you have like a structured process, or you kind of just like, whenever it happens, I'll sit and write till I don't want to anymore? Or you know, how is that for you?
Yeah. I mean, I've been a writer since before I've been anything. Like I wrote my first actual full-length feature screenplay when I was 13. And so I've been always trying to teach myself and always trying to better myself. And anything that I ever learned or tried to teach myself was more in the realm of writing and how to figure that out and do that properly, because you can't obviously do anything until you have a good script. So I'm like very trained in writing, and I definitely used to have more of a process and do it more every day when I was younger and when I was less focused on producing and directing and all this other stuff. Now I am lucky. Like now I at least know what my process looks like, and I'm more confident in doing it. So I know that if I just sit down to do it, I can trust that I will. But it's like so much of it is a matter of just like finding the time or the energy to sit down and say, I am going to do this now. But then my process always looks the same. So now I'm right now writing a sequel to Cup of Cheer. So I'm in the very beginning of that. And the process is like, first start on a macro level, like what is the beginning, middle, and end, then break it down into scenes, then have a card for every scene, and then write it from there. So I will never write a script until I have a full outline, and then rewrite and get opinions from everybody and rewrite. But yeah, so much of that is like knowing your schedule. And I know that I am not a kind of writer who's going to wake up at 8 a.m. to sit down and do a full day of writing. I know that it's going to happen when it happens. If I have a deadline, I will do it before the deadline. But I just have to like trust myself that I will figure it out and get it done. Sometimes that leads to a lot of procrastination, but other times it has been fine.
No, that makes total sense. Yeah, I most of far like writing has just been like sitting down and writing it, no outline. but I did recently write like a comedy script, and I did that like the roadmap. You know,
Mhm.
I don't think like having AI write your script is the maybe the best thing, but I did like kind of use it to be like, okay, can you ask me questions about this scene so
Yeah.
I can, you know, start to write it? And it
Mhm.
was crazy, and I ended up being able to write that in like a week, and I'm so glad it's done and I don't have to do it again. But yeah, man, I think
Yeah.
having a plan, it's kind of a good approach.
And I think you're right. Like for I think it's more people that don't write that say that if you use AI, it is like a horrible, terrible travesty. But like you're right that as an assistant to your creativity, to be able to ask you questions or to be able to just brainstorm, give me 100 ideas, and then you can like piece things together. It's very helpful.
What's I guess what's on the horizon for you? Or are there any specific goals? I know you worked on 1,000 Cuts, the movie's done. It's not out yet. I guess like what are you looking forward to in the future? What's you said you're also writing sequel to Cup of Cheer, but yeah.
Yeah.
What's it looking like?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to eventually releasing 1,000 Cuts just because it's so different from other things that I've done, and I've seen the reaction at festivals, which is really great, but I sort of want to know the general public's reaction to it. So that's always exciting. I am somebody who likes to read every review of my work just to see, even if somebody hates it, just to see what they hated, to see if I agree with them or disagree. Um, so that's it in terms of like release. That will take up a lot, distribution, marketing, and all that stuff. But then so I'm writing another Cup of Cheer, and I'm writing a dark comedy that I'm really excited about, sort of like Before Sunrise, like two people, one day, which I've always wanted to do. And so there's a bunch of scripts that I'm working on, but they are all scripts. So as you know, it is the worst part.
Mm-hmm.
And I would rather, like, I just want somebody to be like, okay, you're shooting a movie in 3 months, go for it. And then I would figure it out. But right now, because there is no dates or deadlines, I'm just fucking around.
Is it helpful for you to kind of have a couple scripts done, like couple options, or
That's what I want to do. And that's what I've been saying that I would do since I finished 1,000 Cuts. It's just like sit and write, but it's harder than that. But some of it, I mean, so much of being a writer is just like living your life and being like, what do I have to say? What do I want to explore right now? 1,000 Cuts was a breakup movie. That was what I wanted to talk about at that time. So now I wanted what is new in my life in the last 2 years, and how can I make that interesting in a movie?
I guess that was kind of one final thing I just wanted to kind of ask you or say, because, you know, obviously for me and for Dustin, and, you know, it's like when you write a song, it's obviously like what you're going through. It's a piece of you.
Mhm.
Is that how you look at stories and like your films? Are they usually related to something in your life, you know?
I didn't know that at first. Like when I got started and like went for my first professional meetings at like 18, pretending that I was like 26. I like didn't know. They were like, what's your voice and what do you have to say? And I didn't know how to answer that. But the whole time I was doing that subconsciously. So like my first movie that you just saw, Dustin, like that is, I didn't know at the time. I was like, I'm just gonna write an entertaining rom-com coming of age thing. But now when I look back on it all these years later, it's like, oh, that is like a lot of my life at that time. That was how I saw things. That was like a coming of age story for me. Then when I look at Cup of Cheer, I'm like, that was a time of my life when I just felt like being wacky and silly and making a bunch of dumb poop jokes. And now when I look at 1,000 Cuts, it's like that was so there. Each time that I look back at something, I'm like, oh, I see what I was going through. I see where I was in my life when I made that. And now I can consciously do that and try to explore myself. And it is like therapy, as I'm sure you guys know, like especially a song, like to be like,
Mm-hmm.
here's my feelings. I'm gonna put them out into the world now, and I don't have to deal with them anymore. It's like a way of getting rid of shit, right?
Yeah, it's like sometimes you don't even, like you said, you don't realize like why you're doing it. It's like, because there's so many times where I write a song, and it's like, yeah, I just like, I want to write this song. I don't know that I'm not analyzing like this is where I'm at, but it is interesting to look back and you can kind of see like a timeline. So that's
Yeah.
really cool. Would you ever consider directing something, like going on a project that you haven't written? Have you done that before, or is it just?
That's a good question. Yeah,
pretty
so I
much-
have done that before. I directed a series that I didn't write. I had a hand in like rewriting it and punching it up and like putting some of my sense of humor and voice into it, but it was not my story and it was not a story that I was particularly connected to. And I enjoyed it. And I think I brought my sensibilities to it in a way that another director might not have, but it is not as satisfying for sure as this being your story and your thing. So I would do it, but I would much rather do my own stuff.
Thanks again for talking through all this stuff. It's, we just kind of started this podcast to just talk about stuff we enjoy and learn some things for ourselves because we're new. So it's just a fun thing that we really enjoy. So thank you.
Yeah.
And
thanks.
I guess if you want to kind of just let everyone know where they can watch your movies and.
Yeah, for sure. Cup of Cheer in the US is, I believe, it's still on Amazon Prime. Is that right?
Yep, that's right.
Yeah, so you can watch Cup of Cheer on Amazon Prime or on Tubi. All About Who You Know, I think might also be on Amazon Prime. It's on Paramount Plus for sure. So maybe that's part of it. But those are the first two, and then keep up with 1,000 Cuts and find out when it's gonna be released and stuff. You can follow me on Instagram at itsjake.ca. And yeah, you can keep up to date with whatever I'm doing with Cup of Cheer too.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Jake.
No, thanks guys. It was a lot of fun. And I can't wait to see Farlight when it's out.
Yeah, can't wait to show you, man.
Yeah.
All right. Catch you guys in the next one.